Welcome back to Chris and Retro. Tonight's video, I'm going to do my best to get this through this. I've been having some problems with my StreamYard app the last few days with it thing going out of sync, and I'm trying to do a couple videos for you that haven't worked out. So we're hopefully getting back on track here tonight. Um, Thank you so much for all of you that were watching the Chad Marks interview and the support that you've had of the channel since. Bunch of new subscribers, man. I really appreciate it. This isn't a prison genre channel, but it certainly is about our collapse and how we can get back. The prevention relative to saying, look, there's high risk in what we're living in. Have you really assessed all the cost? There's a lot of unintended cost when we live high risk lives. And but tonight's video, actually, one of you had come on board. Actually, I spent my notes over here. One of you had come on board here as a subscriber through the Chad Marks video. And actually, it's a gentleman from Chicago. He commented on my Chicago Cubs hat all the time. And I want to make sure I got his channel right. It's Riding Out West. He's got just a YouTube presence, but he's got Riding Out West. He's out in western part of Chicago, Illinois. He lives in a pretty violent area. The video tonight I want to really just illustrate why it is that prevention is so important, why it is that Chad and I are taking the position we are relative to getting ahead of this and having people just avoid the cost. My story takes it down the professional route where you got people that think that, your titles and your awards and your sales success can make you exempt from mental health problems and addiction. That is not true. At the same time, Chad is showing, look, no matter how slick or how much of a gangster you are, there's still a huge amount of cost. There's so many variables you can cause yourself your life, and not death. But, as some of the stories he illustrated, you can actually find yourself in pretty uncomfortable situations for the rest of your life. And so we are aligned in the fact that we are trying to get ahead of this for youth to understand. And Riding Out West on his channel posted last night a very troubling example of why it is that prevention is so important in it. So I'm going to share with you something real quick and hopefully and get this conversation going. Last night in Chicago on Pulaski and Monroe, and this is coming again. Check out Riding Out West. He's got some videos he's put up there, but this is him walking just south of the scene.
Yeah, people are shooting out here. I don't know if you just heard that.
Listen to the gunshots.
Yeah, people are shooting out here. I don't know if you just heard that.
So people are shooting out here. I don't know if you just heard that. Well, people are shooting out there in that scene. So you heard those gunshots. It was brief. Let's just say it's happening right now in your environment. It's brief. A 12 and a 16-year-old, their lives were altered in that moment. Fortunately, both of them lived. The 16-year-old was shot in both of his legs. The 12-year-old was shot in undisclosed places and was, I guess, supported through his wounds on a library step. So, a 12 and 16-year-old from a beef in school that was pushing and shoving is what the account is, turned into gunfire. And both of them now have a story that could have changed and could have been dramatically different. There's allegations that it was adults involved in shooting into the scene, which I can see how, depending on who you're hanging out with and who's involved and, what side's taking what side, and whether these kids were actually starting to introduce themselves into a life of crime, which sounds like they were. I don't want to speculate too much. The bottom line is the message that Chad and I were just trying to convey together through our conversation was prevention, that kids, guess what? It's real. And now we've got a 12, 16 shot in Chicago. This is certainly not the only story. It's definitely not, we're not exempt from that in Rochester by any means. We've had, 3-year-old and a 4-year-old shot last summer in the city. It's not about guns. It's not about that violence. It's about choices we make to put ourselves in those situations that can cause that to happen. Now, I don't know all the circumstances. I was not there, and I certainly have not lived their life. So there could be any number of reasons why they were there, and perhaps maybe one of them was an innocent bystander. I personally have been a victim of, headlines and news stories that are wholly inaccurate depiction of what actually happened, but they do follow a stereotype and they do follow a stigma, and unfortunately, they're out there forever. This situation, there may have been reasons why things happened, and they weren't even actually involved in anything wrong whatsoever, but it does appear outwardly that it's the same old story, same old dance. people getting involved in things they don't understand the cost. Now, I hear those gunshots, and obviously, with Sam's recent interview with, Blood on a Razor Wire TV with Chad, and with her interview on here, and recent events that we've discussed and dealt with, I hear gunshots like that, and I wonder, what her life must have been like in that moment, because it really was that brief. It was about eight rounds that went into the car, and it was about, I don't know, I think I heard 6 that shot at those kids. So why am I doing this? Well, I'm not belaboring the gun shooting, except for the fact that, to me, that you couldn't get much more vivid than that crossroads. But it can get worse. It can get a lot worse. So let's say that there's some situation around that where there was a crime committed and either one of those kids gets themselves in a very serious situation and they have wounds, or paralyzed, or whatever else can possibly happen from those scenes, and they have to serve time with that stuff going on as well. What has that done for their future? What else could possibly go for them? I can't help but notice the irony of the fact that a 12-year-old is getting his wounds treated on the steps of a Chicago public library. You want to talk about a symbol of crossroads? I don't think knowledge is always power in every situation, because you're not going to know everything about everything. I think that grit and tenacity gets you through a lot of stuff that you don't know what you're dealing with, but you're always going to make your next best choice based on what you know and what you bring to the table. I don't think that you're completely inept from being able to make a good life for yourself because you're not infinite knowledge or have a master's degree or anything else. But I do think we can take the lives and circumstances of other people and recognize that that's risk that kind of happened to us. We're not exempt from anything like this. This goes beyond gunshots. It goes really across the board. Look at marriages where you're living a high risk life as a man when you're on the road and you're playing games around and you're being over flirtatious. And maybe the first trip it's just that, and then the next trip it turns into something else, and then the third trip it's turning into cheating on your wife. Or maybe that one drink turns into every time you're on the trip or you're on the road, or every time you got to go out, or it turns to the fact that you can't have a social event without drinking. Or it turns into a relationship where you're actually in recovery. And it's just one buy. It's one moment. I'm just going to go to this one time. I'm not going to say anything about it because it's just once that turns into a full-blown relapse. All those things happen. They all happen every single day. So when I look at this video, and it causes me to think about a lot of different things, and in very sincere and serious ways. But when I consider youth, it's not the YouTube that we're on right now, music videos, the lyrics of other rappers that are living a life that you want to pretend to be. It's not something you want to co-sign if you're not willing to sign up for every single thing. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't life for some people, because some people, that's a life they choose and they're willing to accept everything around it. Just know what you're getting into and accept everything around it. If you're willing to accept the absolute lowest point of that, which can be any number of things, then, by all means go for it. But I feel like a lot of times we get in these situations where we think we're slick and we think we're rolling in a way that makes us untouchable, and we end up in the street shot, or we end up in serious trouble, or for business professionals, tarnished reputations, for elected officials, destroyed reputations. I mean, there's just no area of our society right now that we can't pull up any number of examples that show high risk living can cost you everything. But there's hope. And when you look at like Chad and both of us in our lives, we found new paths, and we found ways to move beyond it. And it really took a lot of rigor. It takes more than it takes a plan, but it takes being willing to step beyond in days when you really just don't feel like it. I think that that's something that I definitely relate to him most on, is the fact there have been days, I'm sure, that he was grinding it out just because he said he was going to do this. And he also has, I think one thing I've noticed through those conversations is that a lot of people have a better sense of the small moments than I do. I think a lot of times I blow past the small moments, but Freedom has a lot of small moments that smell and feel very great. I think of yesterday morning. I'm 51. I have a almost 2-year-old daughter. I've got other kids as well. They're all older and I love them tremendously, but having a 2-year-old at my age is definitely, as a grandfather as well, has its challenges. But I can tell you some of the more peaceful moments I have in my life are the small ones, like when she's a little antsy, getting a little cabin fever and taking her on a walk. those small moments make freedom so great. And I tell you, there's no risk that I took before to feel like a high roller or a high player, a player or fun or whatever it is, whatever that circumstance was, or angry or whatever. There was nothing out there that ever was equal to the moments of pushing my young daughter in a stroller. Count the cost, know the risk, realize what you're playing with. Appreciate you guys tuning in. This video really hit me tonight. I want to thank my new subscriber. Thank you so much from Chicago, and the work that you're doing, or the involvement that you have in this community. Thanks for being part of it and trying to raise awareness to certain things. But I appreciate you bringing this to our attention in such a vivid way. For all of you, make sure that when you're looking at your life, look at seriously. I mean, every single thing, especially in those really great, like super black and white areas around, street violence and things like that. You're either in front of the bullet or you're not. You're either, the feds are either onto you or they're not, as we've learned the last few days. It's inevitable that something is going to come your way if you're out there. Try to get away from it. Find a new life. Find a new lane. There is a lane. And those that get through it are the ones that actually shine, because they put a lot of work into it. Thanks so much for tuning in. And until we talk again, please stay out of trouble.